you ever hit play on a classic comedy, Rush Hour, Crocodile Dundee, maybe American Pie, and before the punchlines even start, you're smacked in the face with a trigger warning, not a rating, not a content advisory, a full-blown disclaimer saying, quote, "Sorry you have a sense of humor." And if that sounds ridiculous to you, congratulations, you're still capable of laughing without a permission slip. Let's start with Rush Hour. The year was 1998. Jackie Chan's high-flying kicks, Chris Tucker's machine gun mouth, pure, unfiltered chaos, and comedy gold. The whole point was cultural clumsiness, fast banter, and mutual misunderstanding. But when the USA Network aired it recently, they slapped it with a trigger warning that read, quote, "We all love our 90s buddy comedies, but this movie was created in a different time. FYI, certain depictions, language, and humor may seem outdated and at times offensive." End quote. Now Rush Hour is dangerous? What's next? Rush Hour 2 getting flagged because Tucker roasts a Chinese guy at a karaoke bar for butchering Michael Jackson so badly that Mike should have filed a police report? This isn't progress, it's performance. Policing jokes that were never meant to be taken seriously by people who can't separate satire from sincerity. And it's not just Rush Hour. Crocodile Dundee, the Aussie gem from 1986, recently got a shiny 4K encore cut. Except this version trims scenes that were once central to the movie's identity. Mick Dundee grabs a transgender woman's groin and jokes about it. Gone. He casually asks the limo driver about his heritage. Scrubbed. Even the iconic, "That's not a knife, that's a knife" line. Muted or altered in some broadcasts, and I am not joking. There was a broadcast in Australia for Boxing Day where they actually cut out the most iconic scene of the movie, the "That's not a knife" scene. Paul Hogan, the star himself, said, quote, "He did it in all innocence and naivety, but it's better without it," end quote. But is it really? That innocence, that unfiltered human awkwardness, that was the charm of Crocodile Dundee. Are we learning from it, or just pretending it never happened? And you think this is just a few isolated edits? Oh, no. We're on a full-blown nostalgia demolition tour. Trading Places features Dan Aykroyd in blackface. Uncomfortable now? Yes. But it was part of the plot, part of the satire. Same with Tropic Thunder, where Robert Downey Jr. played a character in blackface for the entire film, leaning into Hollywood's obsession with method acting to such a ridiculous degree that Brandon T. Jackson's own mother genuinely thought he was someone else entirely. You want problematic? Try Blazing Saddles. The N-word drops 18 times, but it's a Mel Brooks film. The whole joke was that racism is absurd. That's the satire, that's the point. And let's not forget Revenge of the Nerds, panty raids, sexual trickery played for laughs. Then there's SpongeBob SquarePants, yes, the sponge in the pants, whose episode Midlife Crustacean aired for years, hit DVD, and then got purged from Paramount Plus. Why? Because of the panty raid at the end of the episode. Are we seriously censoring animated crustaceans because someone might get the wrong idea about laundry theft? If that made you roll your eyes, brace yourself, because we're just warming up. How about Porky's, a film built around a peephole in a girl's shower? That scene wasn't just infamous, it was the movie. Poster art, trailers, entire marketing strategy, all of it hinged on that moment. American Pie? Let's talk about the webcam scene with Nadia. Jim prematurely ejaculates twice. It's uncomfortable, it's outrageous, and it's funny precisely because it's cringe. The awkwardness is the comedy. So where do we draw the line? And more importantly, who gave the 9% of perpetually offended people editorial control over comedy? Even David Zucker, the guy behind Airplane and the Naked Gun, had something to say about it a few years ago. Quote, "We could be as offensive as we liked. We went where the laughs were. We never thought that we were offending anyone, but if we were offending people, we knew we were on the right track." End quote. He continued, "Hollywood is destroying comedy because of 9% of the people who don't have a sense of humor." Think about that. We're gutting decades of creativity to accommodate the single-digit minority who forgot that laughter is part of the human condition. Want another example? Disney's been on a stealth censorship crusade for years. Take Splash, the 1984 romantic fantasy starring Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. She runs into the ocean completely naked, iconic shot. But on Disney Plus, the scene's been quietly altered. Her hair is digitally stretched down her back to cover her butt like Rapunzel got a CGI upgrade. And then there's the original Lilo and Stitch. Originally, Lilo hides in a dryer during a chaotic scene. On Disney Plus, the dryer has been replaced with a cabinet covered by a pizza box, as if kids everywhere were suddenly building forts and Maytag units. That edit originally appeared in European versions, but now even the US gets the pizza box treatment. Hair censorship, appliance censorship, what's next? Editing Fantasia so the brooms have ergonomic handles? That brings us to the elephant Disney won't even admit is in the room. Song of the South. Not only has Disney refused to release it on Disney Plus, but Bob Iger himself says it's not appropriate in today's world. Even with a disclaimer, it's off the table, vaulted, buried, just scrubbed from existence. And yet the film won an Oscar for Zippity Doo Dah, a song the Disney Channel played as a cheerful music video in the early 2000s. I personally remember seeing it with animated birds dancing across the screen. You couldn't escape it at one point. And more importantly, Whoopi Goldberg, a Disney legend, has advocated for the film's release, saying, quote, "I'm trying to find a way to get people to start having conversations about bringing Song of the South back, so we can talk about what it was and where it came from and why it came out," end quote. She's right. We don't grow by censoring. We grow by contextualizing. Not every review of the film even focuses on racism. Many say the movie's biggest sin is that it's just boring. The animated parts of Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear are delightful. The live-action framing? A total slog. Still, the legacy remained. Splash Mountain was entirely themed around Song of the South, until it was closed permanently in 2023, replaced by Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Great ride, beautiful visuals, but also a quiet burial of a film Disney doesn't want to talk about. And that brings us to a voice who's been waving the red flag on censorship and film preservation for decades, Joe Bob Briggs. On his show, The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder, during his episode hosting Hellbound Hellraiser 2, he delivered a monologue that nailed the heart of this issue. He talked about how physical media matters because when movies are only available through streaming, they're vulnerable to edits, removals, and outright erasure. Joe Bob floated a hypothetical. What if an animal rights group bought the rights to Cannibal Holocaust just to bury it? That film, infamous for its graphic animal cruelty, is widely believed to have inspired the very laws that now protect animals on film sets. And yet, despite its controversy, it remains a landmark in horror history, one that could vanish if the wrong people controlled its distribution. He also brought up Clown House, a film that was released to DVD, but has been out of print for years, making it a hot commodity on the secondhand market. Copies go for big bucks, and the irony? All of the Jeepers Creepers movies, also directed by Victor Salva, are readily available on Blu-ray and streaming. Meanwhile, Clown House is quietly tucked away, though it's still available for random purchase on Amazon Prime Video, but here's the catch. Any digital purchase can be revoked from your library at any time. It's right there in the terms of service for PVOD platforms. You don't own it. You're just borrowing it until someone decides you shouldn't. And while Clown House is controversial because of who made it, Joe Bob's point is broader. If we don't preserve physical media, we lose control over what survives. Nowhere is that more evident than with the original I Spit on Your Grave from 1978. Joe Bob has long defended the film, even doing a commentary track for its official sequel, I Spit on Your Grave Deja Vu. Why? Because the original was so reviled by critics, especially Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, that it effectively destroyed director Mayor Zarki's career. Ebert famously called it a vile bag of garbage, and Siskel and Ebert even stood outside theaters urging people not to see it. But Zarki didn't back down. Decades later, he asked Joe Bob to record the commentary for Deja Vu, specifically to push back against the haters and reclaim the film's legacy. Joe Bob reminded audiences that the original wasn't just exploitation. It was a raw, unflinching response to real-life trauma. Zarki had witnessed the aftermath of a real you-know-what in 1974 and wanted to show the brutality of the experience without Hollywood gloss. Critics hated it. Audiences were divided, but Joe Bob posed the question, is this the most disgusting movie ever made, or the most feminist? And that's the kind of conversation we lose when films are buried instead of debated. And here's the kicker. When VHS was invented, it allowed I Spit on Your Grave to be seen in the very cities and countries where it had been banned. Ireland, Norway, Iceland, West Germany, places that had outlawed the film entirely. Suddenly, people could watch it in their own homes, uncut, unfiltered, and without a censor breathing down their neck. That's the power of physical media. It bypasses gatekeepers. It preserves the raw, unedited truth. And it's the only reason we still have access to films that the industry would rather forget. If you want a real-world example of how trigger warnings don't just shape perception, but shape economic behavior, look no further than Gone with the Wind. When HBO Max pulled the film in 2020, following an op-ed by 12 Years a Slave screenwriter John Ridley, panic buying erupted. People feared the film would be censored or permanently erased from streaming, and suddenly, DVDs, Blu-rays, and even VHS copies of Gone with the Wind were selling for $40 to $60. Collector's editions vanished fast. Amazon sales charts lit up. It became a top seller overnight. And why? Because Gone with the Wind isn't just a classic. It's the highest grossing movie of all time when adjusted for inflation. Its box office, when measured in today's dollars, is estimated between $3.4 and $4.5 billion. Bigger than Avatar, Titanic, or Avengers Endgame. So when viewers sensed it might disappear or be changed, they rushed to hold a piece of it before it was too late. But here's what nobody talks about. The Searchers, a legendary western directed by John Ford starring John Wayne, received the same trigger warning around the same time. It was flagged for its portrayal of Native Americans and frontier-era racial dynamics. Yet The Searchers didn't ignite a collector panic. Its physical copies didn't skyrocket in price. Why? Because cultural weight and familiarity matter. One film dominates pop culture. The other remains a staple of film schools and retrospectives. The public only protects what it recognizes, and that's the danger. If we only scramble to save what's iconic, everything else becomes vulnerable, lost, edited, forgotten. So now I ask you, should Porky's be neutered because of a shower scene? Should Airplane lose its edge? Should Song of the South be exiled forever, even if it could start important conversations? Should I Spit on Your Grave be erased from history, or studied as one of the most polarizing feminist texts in film? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What movies do you think are next on the chopping block? What's worth keeping? What should be contextualized, not erased? Because comedy isn't supposed to be safe. Art isn't supposed to be polished or mass approval. It's supposed to be dangerous, provocative, messy. When we start editing for fear instead of reflection, we're not preserving culture, we're sterilizing it. Rush Hour doesn't need a warning, Lilo and Stitch doesn't need a pizza box, Gone with the Wind doesn't need panic-driven disclaimers, and I Spit on Your Grave doesn't need to apologize for making people uncomfortable. They all need to be preserved, discussed, and seen, warts and all, because that's how you know they mattered. Until next time, keep your movies physical, your memory intact, and your comedy exactly the way it was meant to be. Unapologetic.